So, with that interesting introduction, we're going to take a step back, far, far back. But before I get started, I have two people to thank for this, and for some reason I can't remember their names. I'll just have to thank them in the second video. We're taking a trip back into the days of the PS2, the days of the JRPG. And this is when JRPGs really were big, because we got a lot of JRPGs back in this day. And a lot of them were 2D, and they weren't that bad. With this, we're going to go ahead and start talking about a new game. And obviously, you probably noticed, I'm uploading this at the same time as I'm uploading Trinity Universe. And you're like, well, why are you doing two different games at the same time? Main reason why I'm doing two games at the same time, I want to get to my favorite game as soon as possible. So I'm doing two games that I don't technically really care about at the same exact time, so I can go ahead and move on into my favorite game. And that game is Tonelico 2. But a little bit of Tonelico 1 is needed for understanding of Tonelico 2. So, one of the background story so far that we know is there was a virus that was born, and this virus was born after the first time the world was destroyed. The world was destroyed by human hands at first, and then it was destroyed by the mother virus. And it's to the point where people can't live on the surface of the planet anymore. Everyone lives on floating continents. And they're all supported by a tower. I won't say any more about that. And there's crystals that you use to do certain things. And in this universe, music is technically a weapon. It's a way for interfacing with the tower to make the tower do different things. The tower is like a giant computer that controls everything. So that's your little bit of background. There's a little bit more information that's given here, but you don't really need to know that yet. Now, a little background to the reason why I picked up this game. I've always liked RPGs, and one day back in 2006, I used to be a subscriber to Game Informer, and I read this article about this game, and the reviewer absolutely hated the game and just bashed it unabatedly. Called it mediocre and all other kinds of things. Said the main character was uninteresting, and generally this made me actually, normally they hate on RPGs, especially JRPGs. This made me curious about the game. So I picked up the game and I played it. And was it a great JRPG? No, it was okay. But the reviewer got a lot of things wrong. I'm going to go ahead and fix some of those right now. As you can see, this guy, Laird, is talking right now. Him and the guy who just ran up, Liner, who's the main quote-unquote character of the game, they are, as you play through this game, you're going to find out that they are very boring and you really don't care about them. How can you create a game but you create the main character you don't really care about? That's because this game, Liner as the main character isn't really a main character. He's essentially a mouthpiece. One thing you have to know about the Tonelico series is the Tonelico series is a JRPG, but it also plays like a dating sim. So, the main character, or in this case, Liner, is going to be very bland. And the reason why he's bland is so that you can make the decisions for him and lead in the direction that you want. If he had a flamboyant personality, he would take away from the actual main characters of the game who we have not met yet. There are three main characters to this game, and one of them is actually right in front of us, Shirelia. And we will go more into Shirelia when we run back into her, but for now, we're not going to talk about that. So, you're going to find out that Layard and Liner are quite boring. Pretty much, the reason why you run into Liner and you use Liner is because he's in the position to do what he wants. And that's what you want in this type of game. And that's something that the reviewer completely missed. Outside of that, this game, it's an okay RPG, but it's very, very broken, like a lot of first RPGs are. The second game is the best game of this series. I've said it multiple times, I will say it again. Tonelico 2 is my absolute favorite game in the world. I've been playing video games since I was 4, I'm 26 now. That's 22 years of video games. Tonelico 2 is my favorite game in the world. Hands down. Even the things I don't like about the game, I understand why they didn't. They improved on this game in every single way. The story, animation, character development, everything. So we see three characters here. We've got Liner, who we know. We have Shirelia, who's important, but we don't necessarily know how yet because it hasn't really been explained. And then we have one other person. And this is going to be one of our first introductions to battle, but there's a lot more to the battle system in Tonelico. The third character that we see here, his name is Ayatane. And Ayatane is important, but he's not right now. This weird language that you see is called Hymnos. And it's essentially, you could say it's magic, but it's not really. It's a language of song that's used to interface with the tower. And the fact that it interfaces with the tower hasn't really been revealed yet, but it's something you basically need to know, and there's no real reason to keep it quiet. If you think of this world as a big computer, there are living viruses. The living viruses come from the mother virus. This virus is a special virus that's popped up and is wreaking havoc in the upper parts of the tower. Now she says she'll start chanting and we have to back you up. So see, those two characters, the Vanguard characters, they don't necessarily do the majority of the damage in this game. It's pretty much all about the Raventail. The Raventail's in the back, and the Raventail's basically your magic caster, if you want to put it that way, but super buff, because that's where all of your damage is going to come from. That's where your healing is going to come from 9 out of 10 times. The Vanguard characters are weak without the Raventail. They're almost pointless. Now, normally Raventails do a lot more damage than that, but you have to do, the way that this battle system works is way more complicated than what you just seen. You don't have a large amount of control over the game at this point. And they haven't taught you anything, really. So we're running from a big threat, which is not really all that common. Well, it is kind of common, but it's not all that common because it's like you have to hope that everything is still going to be okay when we get back here. As I said, Liners are rather bland and kind of cliche, and that's because you aren't meant to care about him. Liner is just your mouthpiece. You use him to make decisions that you want in this game. And that's going to be the case for all of the main characters. Liner, whatever his name was in the second game, and whatever his name was in the third game, they don't matter. Really, they don't matter at all. You could replace them with any other male character, and it doesn't necessarily matter. It's a dating sim. That's what you need to remember. And this is still the opening, so of course it's not going to go perfectly according to plan.
シュリア様、これはこの辺り一帯の動力ラインが損傷を受けたようです。おそらくプラチナの都市機能は完全に麻痺し、ウイルスの抵抗は。Also, the music in this game is actually pretty good. I like a lot of the music in this game. The next game's music is absolutely incredible. But a lot of the vocal tracks, the real vocal tracks that's done by Akiko Shikata, are actually really good. If you've seen my Yu-Gi-Oh video, which actually should have gone up before this will, then you'll have heard some of her music. And actually the opening song in the opening video, that is Akiko Shikata. This game does have random encounters, but the random encounters are on a sort of, it's a system. They tell you what's going on with the random encounters, as in how close they are. You have a chance of running into a random encounter, and the game shows that to you by a set of colors. It goes from blue to red. The closer to red, when it starts to flash, that's how you know an encounter is probably coming. You can get them in blue, but they're fairly unlikely. You can also only have a certain number of encounters per area. So once you run out of your encounters, you can just go around and farm and look for whatever you want to in that specific area. As for what's all in this game, you have multiple different systems in this game. You have a crafting system. You have something else that I can't really describe. There's all sorts of different systems in this game for, what would I say, customization as well as options on where you want to choose. But we're going to go through that more as they pop up. You're not going to see a lot of things. You're not going to see your first real Raventail battle even in the second episode. You won't see that until probably the third. Now we're actually about to learn about the first crystal. Because we have this enemy that we can't fight, so we need to leave, I suppose. We need to find a way to exterminate this virus, because otherwise it's just going to wipe us out. And there are multiple hymn crystals. We're going to run into more, especially in the second game. There's a few in the first game. I want to say there's like 5. It's a really small number. There's not that many. You're going to run into a ton in the second game. But in this game, there's not that many. What Purger is a crystal that allows us to fight certain viruses. Viruses that can turn transparent and change into energy so that we can't hit them. So we're being sent to the lower world, and the lower world is a generally interesting world. That's where the first chapter of this game takes place. And if you want to break this game down into chapters, there's about 3 chapters. And the first chapter is the chapter we're headed into now, where we're getting the crystal, the Purger crystal. Second chapter,
we'll go into that when we get to it. The third chapter is almost a post-game chapter. There's not really a good way of describing it. This game does have story paths, but it's not quite as pronounced as in the second game. But it does affect who you end up with in the ending. There's three different girls, three different endings. I don't necessarily know if there's an ending if you don't end up with any of them. I don't know why you would go through that, because if you do that, you limit your access to certain skills and certain attacks from that specific Raven Tail. The more you get to know the Raven Tail, the more skills and attacks that you have access to. Because the way that Raven Tail attacks work, you have to sync up with the Raven Tail. And that's with the little gauges at the very bottom. The more in sync you are with them, the more powerful their attacks will get. But that's still more in the future, and I'll go into that more depth as we get to it. Yes, Liner's pretty much all of Liner's dialogue will just make you groan. Just remember, he's supposed to be boring and cliche because he's not supposed to matter. He's the main character. It's not like he's just going to die at some point. He is the main character. You just don't really you're not really supposed to care about him as a character because he's your mouthpiece.
Come on, let's go.
When I first played this game, I liked it a lot more than I do now, and that's only because I have a reference for what an art and game really should be in the form of the second game.
What's that? Damn! Is that a monster from the blast line?
But it's still okay. I don't
This isn't good.
really desperately hate this game. It's an okay JRPG. And also, this is another sign. I'm talking over his dialogue because his dialogue's terrible. His voice actor could have done it better.
That airship's gonna
How was
crash!
that? I don't know. You're about to crash. You would
Come on,
think that you would
Jared,
react a little
move!
differently. So we crash landed in the forest.
そういえば見当たりません
Yay.
ねどこ行ったんだまったく
There's apparently some girl named Orica who's missing, and Liner's nowhere near his crash vessel, which definitely should have killed him. But anyway, we're not going to care about that. This particular scene actually runs in stark contrast with some dialogue that you hear later, but let's not worry about that. Essentially, he just got
見た
healed.
こともないところくそ体が痛むそうか墜落したんだ引く手はどこに落ちたんだ見当たらないってこと
So for right now, we're just setting the scene to run into the girl we just saw.
大
In the
変なこと
future.
になったな使徒の
That's
祭壇に
Orica.
ウイルスが
Orica is one of the three Raven Tails in this game. And Orica's my personal favorite out of the Raven Tails in this game. My favorite Raven Tail of all time is Chloe, but that's second game. We'll go into that later.
ヒューネブローチ
But there's the Orica story, and then there's another character story, and then there's the Shirelia story. I will be going through that other character story first because it's my order of things. I go through the character I don't like as much before I go through my favorite character. It's not that I don't like that other Raven Tail, I just like Orica better.
引く手を探さないとなあまり壊れてなければいいけど
Now, if you see that gauge down in the bottom right-hand corner, that's actually the gauge that you see for when you. That's your encounter gauge. It goes from dark blue to red, and then it starts to flash. When it starts to flash, you're probably going to get encounters. I will go over how broken this game is later on once I get my first Raventail, but for now, you're not going to see that. Oh yeah, you can also jump. It does have a purpose because you'll need to jump to get around to different places, but for right now, you won't see me jumping that much. Items are just going to be sitting around. You'll see me do a little bit more exploring than I do here in the second video, and after that I'm going to cut out most of my exploration because there's not really a
オリか
big point to doing it.
探したぞどこ行ってたんだ
Right off is actually a little important as well, but
まあいい
eh.
見つかってよかったよ
I'm not necessarily sure if they're trying to set those two up as a sort of love interest, but you don't really care about right off either. The majority of the characters in this game you don't really care about. The most interesting side characters we won't see for a little bit.
捜索任務は終了だカルル村に帰還し
But
領長教会へ戻る
yeah,
新刊はパートナーのレイバテイルをいたわってやるようにな
there's not that much to say because not a lot has happened. All we know is that we're looking for the Purger Crystal and we're looking for our ship because we seem to have been ejected from our ship with extreme force. Far enough so that it's like 3 screens away. Another thing to know is that all Raventails are girls, but not all girls are Raventails.
ほら無駄話は帰ってから言ってやれ
Raventails have weird statuses. Where Liner comes from, Raventails are really highly treated and
どう
valued.
したオリか
In the lower world, they're used. It depends on the person that they're partnering up with, but they're generally used as slaves
実際のところ
to a point.
司祭殿が決める
And there's different grades of Raventails and all this other stuff.
まあそう心配するな
Like, there's a grade D Raventail, a grade A Raventail, and a grade double S Raventail in this particular game. In the next game, Raventail grades matter a little bit more. And the grade of a Raventail is actually has to do with their life expectancy whenever they use song magic.
さあオリカも疲れているだろ
A lower grade Raventail needs to have something so that they can live longer. They tend to die faster than regular Raventails or higher grade Raventails. Highest grade Raventails can live for hundreds to thousands of years.
これじゃパージャを見つけてもプラティナの町へ帰れないくそどうしたらいいんだ
ほほうこれは見事な墜落っぷりだな村で噂になってるわけだぜ
Now we're about to meet one of our side characters. Yeah, everyone's a side character besides the Raventails in this game. This is Jack. He's going to introduce himself eventually, but his name is Jack. So, yeah, there's that. Jack
待ってくれ俺は教会とかの
Jack is a very interesting character. Where he comes from, his relationship with Liner, they're a little interesting. I don't remember the full details, but let's just say Jack doesn't fully tell the truth in everything. There's things that Jack knows that Liner should know, but he doesn't.
そんじゃま金になりそうなパーツをちょいと拝借しますか
Also, everyone on the lower world apparently is a thief because everyone tries to steal this ship.
おい聞けよ
Now, he recognizes the material of the ship, but that's a completely different story that we'll go ahead and get into later.
俺の飛空艇を勝手に漁る
Jack is also one of the characters that we see in future games. We see Jack in
どこにそんな
the
証拠があるんだ
third game. I don't remember if we see him in the second
そんなも
one.
のないけど俺
Liner and the other Raven Tails are mentioned in the second game, but they don't have an appearance. And you get to use at least one character from the game previous in the next game. Since there's no game previous to this one, there's no one to use from Tonelico 0, I guess.
一旦帰るわ。お前がいるとうるさくて集中できやしねえ。いなくなった頃にまた来ることにするわ。
おい。下の人は荒っぽいって聞いていたけど、本当にそうだな。それにしても困ったな。とにかくまずは町か村を探すしかないか。
That's one of the battles. All the battles in the beginning of this game are rather boring. At the beginning of the game, when you start having to require a Raven Tail, then they get a little bit more interesting. But anyway, that's actually going to be the end of this particular video. In the next video, we don't really get anywhere, but we're going to continue that anyway. Anyway, for now, this is Suike Novus signing out.